In the midst of everything that's been happening this week, from Ukraine to Texas to Florida, I was really struggling with how on earth do I preach about the miracle of humanity? And I have to say, after hearing everybody that's spoken today, I kind of feel like I don't need to preach about it. I'm going to, sorry. But, one of the things that was perhaps the universe's own little miracle for me was this weekend. This weekend happens to be the weekend when Laylat al-Miraj, or the night journey, is celebrated and honored by many Muslims around the country. Laylat al-Miraj is a holiday that commemorates a miraculous moment in the life of the Prophet Muhammad. It commemorates a night where the Prophet Muhammad journeyed from Mecca to Jerusalem and then to heaven and back, all within a span of a few hours. As the story goes, Muhammad was resting in Mecca when he was visited by the angel Jibril, or Gabriel, and Gabriel brought what is called a buraq, a divine, spirited, winged horse for Muhammad to ride. And so this divine horse, defying time and space, quickly flew Muhammad over from Mecca to the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. And then from there, Muhammad traveled to heaven on the back of that buraq and explored the many parts of heaven, interacting with some of the prophets who came before him, like Jesus, Moses, Abraham, and many more that go unnamed in our texts because patriarchy. Exactly, because of patriarchy, we don't necessarily name all of them. And again, while he was up there in heaven, Muhammad was then allowed to meet God, something that no living being had done before. And that's where he said that's where it is said he has received the instructions for Muslims to pray 5 times a day. And again, all of this is said to have happened within just a couple of hours. By the time Muhammad returned to Mecca, his bed was still warm. Now, in all of the faith traditions that we as Unitarian Universalists draw our inspiration from, these stories that we hear are incredibly miraculous. And it's not just because they feature some prophetic being or some interaction with a God being. So what makes them miracles? We've heard so much of that today, that in that Webster dictionary, that surprising and welcome event. I do take umbrage with that definition from the Webster dictionary. That surprising and welcome event that is divine doesn't necessarily have to be unexplicable or inexplicable by science. A miracle can be one of science's device. Because a miracle can be something unbelievable, defying our understanding of what is possible. It can be extraordinary and amazing. It can depend on a miracle is when something that we are depending on beyond us has some control that is beyond our capacity to control, that does defy our current understanding. A miracle reflects the deepest yearnings of our hearts. It answers a need or a want that we never thought we might be able to have met. A miracle is something we are grateful for, something we are grateful to receive or encounter. That can be divine, and that can be scientific. And by that very definition, we ourselves, as we have heard today many times, are miracles. When we take our physical selves, our bodies, the blood, the flesh, the bone, the inner and interwoven circuitry, those infinitely small particles that are what make us physically human, the Black liturgist and Christian theologian Cole Arthur Riley reminds us in her newest text, This Here Flesh, that we are remarkably material beings. When we speak of bearing the image of God, I believe no small part of that is a physical being. Many of us, unfortunately, in the pursuit of the spiritual, become woefully neglectful of the physical. So let's get physical. Consider the ranges of shapes and sizes, tones and textures, connections and gaps that make our human bodies, and all of the ways that they can show up. There are so many ways in which our bodies can show up, and no one set, no one combination is any less worthy of life and love, any less worthy of being considered human. And our bodies are always changing. None of us move through life with the same body we are born with. In the song Human by Tank and the Bangas, we are reminded that for most of us, 98% of the atoms in our bodies are replaced every year. 15 million blood cells are destroyed every second, and our ears never stop growing. Might be why I have some trouble with these mics. And all of that happens outside of our control and our will. And our bodies, they are malleable and resilient. We can permanently adorn or decorate our skin. We can adapt to using tools that promote our mobility and our survival. And we can receive essential medical care and hormones so that our outward-facing selves reflect our innermost selves. And beneath the surface, there are countless inner workings that just happen. Our lives depend on interconnected systems of circuitry, nervous systems, circulovascular systems, muscular systems, skeletal systems. I didn't go to med school. Those of you who did, you know what they are. They operate inside of us without our conscious control. When we were doing our meditation today, when was the last time before then that you thought about your breath just happening? And as we acknowledge about how those systems work and deteriorate and break grows, we developed and adapt ways to nurture and care for their extraordinary operations. And with all that we know, we are still learning. We are still learning to recognize and love all of the ways our bodies show up. The different languages that the kaleidoscope of humanity's physicality speaks, the myriad of ways that our bodies signal to us that they need something. Unfortunately, one of the ways we have neglected that miracle of our humanity is not always listening to how disabled bodies can expand our understanding of how to truly nurture the miraculousness of all of our being and all of our beings. In recounting her own experience with chronic illness, Cole Arthur Riley writes, "After dozens of hospitals and hundreds of appointments, I've learned that this world has no commitments to my body. No one will try to understand it more than I will. I learned the necessity of not only listening to your own body, but of also fighting for it. When the burning and twitching came, I learned that man will never sit still long enough to watch for them. And when the rashes came, I learned man will never search my skin for as long as I need them to. We are poorly attuned to one another's bodies. It is a latent evil," she writes. Riley offers that to know your own body is a spiritual care and protection. To know the body of another is a spiritual union and conciliation. To become acquainted with the many forms our bodies can take, the many ways in which the miracle of our physical selves needs to be nurtured, is a holy act of gratitude, a holy affirmation of worth for every single one of our beings. Because as we heard in our call to worship today, life itself is a miracle. Our very existence is a miracle to ourselves, something that happens without our control or will. We are all brought into being by those who came before us, dependent on others for our earliest survival and development. And for many of us who have been on a family planning journey, even with all that can be controlled, there is a humbling level of dependence on microscopic systems to cooperate with your own deepest yearnings. We truly are the breath of our ancestors, the dreams and prayers of our elders, the Spirit of God, the embodiment of love here in the flesh. Our lives are a gift we never asked for, and maybe aren't always grateful for. Our ears are always changing. You know what? I'm going to give in to the limitations of my body. Spoiler alert. Our own lives are a gift we've never asked for, we're not always grateful for, but we are worthy of receiving them simply because they are. And this is a truth for so many of us that live within marginalized identities or oppressed bodies, because we have to fight to remind ourselves of it every single day. Whether it is through being reminded in song that you are me and I am you, and every single one of us is worthy, in demanding care for the ancestral traumas that still flow through our own being, fighting like hell against idolatry and imperialism that makes us disposable, or ensuring that our lives are filled with pleasure and joy and song. As sacred as our differences make us, they have been used to deny that inherent miracle that is each and every one of our beings. And as Unitarian Universalists, our faith compels us to challenge and change that latent evil. One of the most radical assertions of Unitarian Universalism is that every single human is endowed with inherent worth and dignity. We are all born from an unimaginable, unshakable love that brought us into being, from which we cannot ever be separated. Our faith insists that a system that works to erode our full humanity is unjust and harmful and must be dismantled. While the UUA Side with Love organizing strategy team on which I serve crafted that statement that I just read in response to violence that continues against Black lives in this country, that faithful insistence applies to the many, 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 many ways our faith calls us to affirm and promote the very miracle of our existence for every single one of us. And that requires embracing another less revered aspect of our humanity, our flaws and limitations. One of my favorite parts of the story of Laylat al-Miraj is when Muhammad first receives directions from God about prayer. He was told that all Muslims should pray 50 times a day, 50. As he was making his way back through heaven, Muhammad is stopped by Moses, who, as I imagine it, tells him, "Bro, listen. Those people are not gonna do 50 prayers a day. Trust me, I know. Go back up, ask for less." And so Muhammad does go back up to God and ask for less. Can Muslims pray maybe fewer times? And God says, sure, let's make it 45. Muhammad is again told by Moses, go back. And this continues for 9 times until we finally get to the 5 prayers a day that many of us associate with the Islamic traditions today. Whether or not that story happened, especially the way I like to imagine it in my head, there is something profoundly freeing and beautiful in a miracle that includes our limitations as people. This acknowledgement that there is something we are not capable of in a story where there is a flying horse and a man going up to heaven. That is an invitation to remember that what we cannot do, the ways in which we are limited, they shouldn't be engaged as burdens, but as parts of our whole and holy selves. The humility to admit that I cannot do this, and the vulnerability that is necessary to request help, they are baked into our worthy and miraculous being. It doesn't make us any less powerful or any less strong. The parts of ourselves that can and have caused harm, the parts of ourselves that give into the temptations of division, dehumanization, and pettiness that can cause mistakes, they don't make us any less worthy of love. Those moments when we feel limited, those moments when we behave in flawed ways, they don't diminish our beauty of our being. They remind us that we are always learning, always growing like our ears, always changing beyond what we know ourselves to currently be. They remind us that the miracle of being human is being human. That the whole damn process of living is complicated and messy, and that there is a divine expectation that we will all make mistakes. By embracing that part of our humanity, we all will live more fully into the sacred, sacred gift that is one another. By knowing and naming those ways in which we are limited, the ways in which we hurt one another and this world, the ways in which we need one another to grow and to thrive, we reveal one more layer of the miracle of being human. We cannot and should not do it alone. The UU retelling of our loaves and fishes story that we heard this morning is exactly a reminder of that. When Jesus and his disciples were faced with this crowd of 3,000, 5,000, Christian theologians, when they're faced with that many group of folks and they don't have that much food left, and they still decide, well, let's feed people. It's because they knew to trust the community. That in that moment, the travelers that had come to meet him had their snacks, had their Luna bars, had their fishes and loaves with them, and would provide. Because the ways in which we are limited as individuals doesn't negate the ways in which we are miraculous as community. So maybe what makes the miracle of our humanity isn't simply defined by what we are, what is, but it's about how we approach it, how we approach one another with awe, with gratitude, with humility, with a reverence for one another and for the complexity of our beings. To treat our lives as miraculous is to live into that sacred charge of responsibility. And so, having faith in miracles, I think, is having faith in the best of all of us. Go out and be a miracle.